fight, gosh darn it! Hey fellow glitchers. Cuphead, the new old 1930s cartoon game with stunning hand-drawn animation, live jazz music, and frustrating yet addicting gameplay. Despite these qualities, however, Cuphead has more glitches than I know what to do with. Well, I guess that's not true, because here I am making a video about them. So, let's jump into it. The first glitch will require both Cuphead and Mugman. Place Cuphead over by the axe guy next to the grove of trees, and then get Mugman over by the... Wait, where's Mugman? Mugman? He's supposed to be here. Hold on. Mugman! Come on! Hurry up! You're supposed to be... You're not... forget it. The next glitch we have is... Well, it's not really a glitch, but it's super funny. I call it parry spamming. Basically, you spam parry from underneath a pink object that can be parried infinite times, and also it doesn't have a cooldown. You can do this on Honeycomb Herald with the magic sphere things, whatever they are, and time pretty much freezes during the whole process, which means your special gauge will fill up in only a fraction of an in-game second. This is also possible in Funfair Fever with the pink balloons. Speaking of balloons, if you get one off screen and hit it, the stretching sound effect that's played will occur every frame until it explodes, which makes for some real noise. You know, I kinda like some peace and quiet right now, but I don't feel like opening the menu. Maybe one of these dice can help. Let's talk to this guy and then quickly go through his text and run away. There we go. Maybe I don't like this. Perhaps it just wasn't enough music. Fortunately, I know a certain quartet who may be able to help us out. Get the simplistic versions of the map themes going by talking to this guy, then listen to the entirety of a quick break from the Barbershop Quartet. You'll notice that the original version of Inkwell Isle 2 starts playing. If you talk to the quartet once more, but cancel the song, the music will suddenly sound twice as good. Unfortunately, it's not quite the same the second time around. Okay, the next glitch also requires the help of Mugman. Hurry up! I'm almost on the next glitch! Let's just get started without him. In Treetop Trouble, it's possible to get on top of the tree trunk. You need to have one player die, and then when they're pretty high, jump up and revive them, and then immediately die yourself. The other player should revive you, and you should gain just enough height to make it to the top. Now if only Mugman would... Oh, here he is. No, not yet! There we go. There's not much you can do up here, but at least you can't get hit. Well, actually, if you use the invincibility super art, you can make it all the way to the right and experience a bunch of wonky collision. If you jump too high though, you'll bounce up and down like a basketball and eventually die. But if you have Mugman by your side, you can keep parrying each other and eventually make it to the top of the tree. But you'll be permanently stuck on the outside. If you want to get down from the trunk, just make it to the left side and you'll be able to jump off the edge. But that puts you at the start, so you might as well reset. If you don't want to use two players, you can always do a precise jump from this spot, dash, and then use a super arc to get on top. Alright, now that we have Mugman, we can finally do the glitch I've been wanting to do. So, as I was saying, get Cuphead or Mugman over by this axe guy, and then get whoever's left next to Botanic Panic in this little corner. Talk to the axe guy, and when the screen zooms back to whoever's in the corner, he should get pushed out of bounds. Before I go any further, I'm going to explain how the camera works in the game. First of all, the camera is always centered on the player, except when you're near the edge of the map, in which case it gets as centered as possible without going over the edge. When there are two players on the screen, the camera centers on the average position of the two, or if there was a string tied from Cuphead to Mugman, that would fall in the center of said string. The key difference with two players is that they can only separate so much. When either of the players reaches the edge of the screen, technically both of them hit the edge at the same time, they won't be able to go any farther. One more thing I should mention is that when you talk to an NPC, the camera centers on them no matter where the other player is. While you're talking to the NPC, the other player may go off screen, but only until you finish talking, and this is where the glitch comes in. If both players are on the edge of the screen when either of them talks to an NPC, you'll notice that when the camera zooms back to the other player, they'll get pushed away from the screen until they hit collision, which is enough to push them back into the view of the camera. However, if the player that's on the inside of the camera's view hits an object, you'll get pushed out of the camera and the camera will stop, because even though both players are outside, the center of the camera is where it needs to be. Let's go back to the original situation. Here, when the camera returns to normal after talking to the axe, the force of the camera's collision is greater than the resistance of this specific corner, and ends up pushing whoever happens to be standing there into the water. If Cuphead was pushed out of bounds, we can get him back on screen by simply removing Mugman. If Mugman rejoins, he will also appear out of bounds. However, if player 2 happened to get out of bounds, we can still fix the camera, but it takes a lot longer. By getting Cuphead to the top of the map with this bullet and Mugman next to the bridge, the camera should end up pushing Mugman into collision when the camera resets, which will put him back into existence. The biggest problem with this setup is now Cuphead is stuck on the island and there's no way to get him off it with Mugman still in the ocean. Hey Mugman, get down from there. Don't make me get my chainsaw. If you keep the out-of-bounds players outside the screen, you can walk in any direction for I think an infinite amount of distance because there's nothing to stop you save a power outage. But since you can't see a thing, it doesn't do a whole lot of good. While out of bounds, you can visit all those little islands you could only look at before, such as the lighthouse. You can also visit the edge of World 2, but you can't enter Sugarland Shimmy, no matter how much it looks like the real deal. You can, however, enter the Dye House and, if you haven't beaten Cadney, softlock the game. The only practical aspect of this is skipping the plane tutorial by entering Threaten and Zeppelin from above. We could theoretically skip Isle 3 because there's no check as to whether you beat all the bosses or not when entering Inkwell Isle. But once you got there, you wouldn't be able to beat King Dice anyways. But regardless, I couldn't find any spot to get out of bounds with. I probably tried every single corner on the map and none of them did anything. I tried the same thing in Island 2, although less extensively, and got the same results. The next glitch involves the mountain goats and rugged ridge. If you didn't know, these dice spawn by ropes that fall from the ceiling. After they drop down, the rope springs back up and doesn't appear again until the goat respawns. But if you defeat it right after it hits the ground, the rope stops in place and decides to hang around. It doesn't disappear, even when another goat comes down. That means we can spawn ropes all day, and that's exactly what I did. I set up an automated system using the lobber and let the game run for over 72 hours, and ended up with something that looks like this. It's not ridiculously laggy, but it's definitely unplayable. If you're wondering what that explosion is in the middle of the screen, it's the pyro head that normally floats around the platform, but it's not glitched. These things apparently have 9,999 health, and they just explode when you defeat them. And as if that wasn't weird enough, if you wait a couple of hours, they will respawn below the platform with a unique animation and start spinning again. Only this time they explode the first time they're hit. Why this is a thing, I have no idea. And here's a time lapse of the whole shebang. As you know, the pause menu in Cuphead is supposed to, well, pause the game. But there are some instances where it kinda slacks off. In Treetop Trouble, these buds will float up or down when you pause, but for some reason it's just visual and their hitboxes will remain the same. When you're on the map in a state where you're getting pushed, such as when both players are in a corner, pausing will cause you to slide across the screen. These are both pretty cool, but there's a way to prevent the pause menu from stopping anything. Besides the pause menu, the game will freeze when player 2 enters or when you use a super art. Each of these has a frame of time that tells it to pause the game and then tells it to resume the game. We're going to manipulate these functions to achieve enumeration, suspension, exemption. Here's the plan. We need to get a pause timer to end while the menu is up, which will override the pause enforced by the menu. But to get the menu up during a super art or a second player entrance, we need the timer on one of those to be overridden. Luckily, we can have player 2 enter during a super art, which means we have a case. First, use a super art and then have player 2 enter. When you see the gameplay resume, pause the game. When the text disappears, you should gain control of the players. And that's it. There are quite a few things that you can do while the menu is up. For starters, you can adjust the volume of the game while you play, which is definitely a selling point, obviously. You can open the control menu, which prevents you from seeing what you're doing, which is nice if you want a challenge. If you die while the screen is up, it will usually stay up, but the whole thing will look like some sort of draft. You can get rid of it by simply exiting. You can also do what I call Mugman suicide. With the menu up, have Cuphead die and then press remove player 2. The game will immediately tell you that you died and will end. Now this is normal and can be done in normal gameplay, but if you finish a level, there are a couple seconds where pressing that button is still possible, meaning you can die even after you reach the goal. Okay, do you remember this glitch? It's known as the Mugman Army, but it was patched in an early version of the game, sadly. I never learned how to do it because I knew it wouldn't work, but I found another way to get infinite Mugmans, or Mugmen if you will. The Mugman Army glitch 2.0 works because of the pause glitch I just covered, but during this whole process I found an easier way to get the pause glitch to work. All you need to do is have player 2 enter a matter of frames after you remove him. You'll notice that nothing pauses when the player 2 has joined text pops up, and that's your cue to pause. After that, the whole glitch works the same way. Go back to the point where you paused right after having player 2 enter. Right now, the game is frozen, but will resume in a few seconds. This is the best time to do the glitch, as you can spawn a lot of Mugmen with minimal inputs in a short period of time. Before the text disappears and the game resumes, you must go into the menu and select Remove Player 2, and then immediately have Mugman join you just like you did to get the pause glitch to happen in the first place, except this seems to be a little more precise. Keep repeating this as fast as possible to prevent any of the Mugmen from completely spawning, and stop when the text disappears. If you did it correctly, the amount of Mugmen on screen should be equal to the amount of times you hit Remove Player 2. Doing this with 2 separate controllers, I was only able to get a couple of Mugmen from the get-go. I guess I wasn't able to press the buttons fast enough. However, you can add as many more Mugmen as you want as long as you don't mess up the inputs. When you attempt to do the glitch while the Mugmen are still alive, they'll disappear. But if the Mugmen die and then you do the glitch, the dead Mugmen will decide to stick around, and the new Mugmen will add to the total. Then you just need to revive the dead Mugmen, which isn't too much of a problem. You just have to parry like crazy. Keep in mind that if you make one mistake during this process, your entire Mugmen army will evaporate. So maybe don't get too greedy. After trying to figure out the properties of the Mugman clones, I decided that they were closer to Cuphead than Mugman. In a way that's true, but it all depends on the circumstances. When Cuphead is dead, the game will end as soon as the original Mugman is dead, regardless of how many clones are still alive. And the clones can usually walk around and everything is supposed to be stopped. The clones tend to hit like normal, but they aren't affected by death planes, and can sometimes be seen jumping up from the bottom of the screen. Other times they will seem to just disappear because the pit is so deep. When you remove player 2 while clones are present, the original Mugman will disappear, but the clones will stick around. They can't do anything because there's no way to control them, but they can still get hit. And this is why I thought they were connected to Cuphead. If they die, the game ends, even if Cuphead is full health. I think this happens because it's one player mode and any death will end the game, even if it's not Cuphead. And by normal rules, that wouldn't matter, because Cuphead is the only player that can die. When this happens, Cuphead will get stuck in whatever animation he's currently in, and the results are often amusing. Before I continue on, I'm going to say a word about my setup. I'm playing Cuphead on my PC, and I'm using a GameCube controller which Cuphead doesn't recognize as an Xbox controller, and doesn't treat it as such, which means I can't navigate menus. I used an Xbox controller emulator to circumvent this issue, but sometimes the game reads my controller as both an Xbox controller and a GameCube controller. Long story short, the way to get the GameCube controllers to work properly with Cuphead is not easy. I've never found a permanent way to set it up, it's just always been pretty buggy. Although the setup has given me no small amount of grief, it has its pluses, such as being able to control Mugman and Cuphead at the same time. The reason I bring this up is, first, it makes it easier to do the pause glitch and, consequently, the Mugman army glitch. Second, it's led to a couple of glitches that I'm sure can't be done otherwise. So, with my setup, the Mugman army glitch is way easier to do. All I need to do is press A when I'm hovering over Remove Player 2, and the glitch happens automatically. Then I just keep going to the menu and pressing that button over and over, and voila, a mini Mugman mob. It's also way easier to add Mugman in the same way. Okay, now that we have 8 times the power, what can we do? Well, bosses are pretty much a joke. It takes half a minute without sweat, usually because the boss dies before its final phase or right after it starts its final phase. The best boss for this is, in my opinionated opinion, Rumor Honeybottoms. She'll be lucky if she can even turn into a plane. Ruse of a News is also pretty good, especially because it's so easy. Other than monopolizing the bosses, having 8 times the projectiles hit a surface can be pretty noisy. So noisy, in fact, that the music decides to glitch or just stop altogether. Using your super arts can also be pretty funny. If you're wondering whether or not this Mugman army glitch works on the map, it doesn't. It's kind of a bummer too. I was looking forward to terrorizing the general populace. Before we wrap this video up, I'm going to show off the perks of my wonky setup. The first one happens when you enter a dye house, the shop, or Elder Kettle's house. Basically, you can enter as many times as you want before it loads. Nothing really happens except for the noise. But hey, it's pretty fun to do. The second thing is, well, you can crash the game. Specifically, when you walk up to something that triggers one of these button prompts when you're controlling both players, the prompt will continually appear at the rate of 1 per second, and it gets a little laggy. So laggy that the game doesn't. It just doesn't. And when you combine this with the Mugman army glitch, You can also do this in the tutorial by the exit. Basically the same thing. Also, I guess Mugman clones can parry Cuphead when he exits? I don't know why that happens. While we're here in the tutorial, there's a trick where if you get on the opposite side of the screen as the other player and then walk to an edge without falling off, your character will spaz out. It's pretty funny, but it doesn't really have any purpose. It's not even good for getting out of bounds with. So apparently that's possible. You know, I'm just gonna play a normal level right now. Take that, you oversized Sicilian. How about some of this? And that. And, Thanks for watching. If you like glitches as much as me, then be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you later.